My name is Vineet Malhotra. In September of this year, a Hindu temple was vandalized and a saffron flag outside it was pulled down by unidentified people in East Leicester, the United Kingdom. The sporadic violence that erupted left the Indian community in Leicester numb and in fear and left the world wondering what really happened there. A report released by Network Contagion Research Institute has put light on the incident, bringing into focus the role that social media played in fanning this violence. However, a distortion of the report was published by Bloomberg, which put blame on India-based terror and Twitter accounts, I beg your pardon. Soon after Bloomberg's article was published, the lead author of the report slammed Bloomberg. She said that the Bloomberg, choosing a headline that continues to push a false narrative that the NCRI report debunked, is indicative of systemic misreporting of the Hindu diaspora and India that infects Western media. Even though the headline of the article has been edited by Bloomberg following the author's objections, the question really is, this is how narratives are twisted and turned against Indians. And this is something that we are fighting, and this is also something that we're going to talk about. Ambassador Suresh Kumar Goyal, former diplomat, joins us on the show. Rashmi Samant, human rights defender, is also with us on the program. And Dr. Parth Parehar, author, is also with us. In fact, he was a part of that report, which was instrumental in describing what really happened in Leicester. Parth, if I can start with you, if you can hear me. Dr. Parth?
I can hear you, yes.
All right. Your first reaction as to what did you feel when you saw this selective excerpt being picked out of that report and being slapped all over the world, demonizing and vilifying Indians to an extent which is not true or even mentioned in that report?
Yeah, thank you for hosting this debate and for asking that question. So I think when the team of authors saw that headline, we felt that our research was being misrepresented. As people who are researchers, we were trying to bring out the truth in the matter, and we felt that the way that this Bloomberg article was portraying our research was actually doing the exact opposite. Just to give your viewers some context, the headline of that article said that accounts in India were the ones that fanned the unrest, whereas our research very clearly lays out the ways in which UK-based accounts who are local were actually misrepresenting on-the-ground events to mobilize Muslims specifically to have animosity against Hindus and to create a conflict between the two communities. We lay out several different misinformation about the Hindu community that came from these accounts, including false rumors of kidnapping, false rumors of a mosque being attacked by Hindus. None of these incidents actually took place. And so we felt that it was a complete repudiation of a report that this headline was put out. Another thing that we feel that this headline actually did was it confirmed one of the underlying narratives about the Leicester riots that was prevalent prior to our report, which was that it was a Hindutva kind of inspired movement. Now, while our report does find that there were Twitter accounts, social media accounts in India that were involved in portraying Muslims as blameworthy in this incident, and some of that rhetoric did escalate to the level of anti-Muslim rhetoric, we still have no evidence whatsoever for there having been any activity in India that actually led to any sort of violence in Leicester or in the UK. And our report was very clear about that.
Absolutely. Dr. Parth, what does this tell you? What does this tell you about the sentiment which prevails in the Western media? What does this tell you about, the vulnerabilities with which Hindus are perhaps, trying to get by in Western countries and being targeted in this manner? You've also spoken about Hindu phobia in the past. Is this something which falls under the gambit of, in the ambit of that, entire, hatred, which is spanning for the last few years rather, not decades, last few years rather?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I don't want to speak specifically for the reporter in this case because I don't know what their motives were specifically. But I think if you look at it in general, the Western media certainly has a certain image of India and of the Hindu community. If you think about the stories that are published in the Western press, they disproportionately focus on violence that's inflicted by the Hindu community on the Muslim community in India. And while many of those incidents actually do in fact take place, the fact of the matter is that that the distribution of stories is not reflective of on-the-ground events in India. And so I think to some extent the imagination or the ability of Western journalists and Western commentators in general to reason about India is somewhat limited by their prior perceptions of what the country is like and what the dynamics of that country are. And that dynamic informs what is newsworthy and what isn't. The headline, in my view, given this background, was likely chosen to fit that preconceived idea.
All right. Ambassador Goel, sir, if you can hear me. Ambassador Goel?
Yes, I can hear you, Vineet.
Ambassador Goel, your initial thoughts on this? This is obviously misrepresentation of fact. This is basically a concoction of something which was not found in that report. What were they hoping to achieve from this? That people will not object that they've picked up something which is not there in the report?
Vineet, it's a very complex dynamics here, really speaking, and there are no straightforward answers to what you are asking. Number one, I've not seen the report, and I've only seen what actually was reported in the media and how Bloomberg has actually tried to misrepresent and said something which was actually not in the report, according to the publishers of the report. What I do know is, I'm going to take a slightly different line of thinking here. Whatever the report might have said, I'm sure the report was actually based on thorough investigation of the posts and the media and what they came across. I'm sure about that. Two things. First of all, I have lived abroad in different postings for practically 30 years. What I do notice that there was a kind of a misrepresentation of India in 90s and even early few years of this millennium. That misrepresentation of India, I would not really go as far as saying that it was a prejudice against Hindus. In fact, one time, until about just a couple of years ago, India was praised for the kind of religious harmony that India had despite the diversity of religions we had. It's only recently have begun to find this kind of Hindu-Muslim divide being created, even in the Western countries. For example, in India, there are Gujarati Muslims. There are Muslims from different parts of India. So there was a Pakistan issue, yes. It was demonstrations against the Indian High Commission a couple of months ago. There was India-Pakistan issue. But it did not translate into Hindu-Muslim issue, as far as I know, in the West. It was not. Number two, I think it highlights what is happening now. It highlights the role played by social media in creating narratives. We do not know whether it's a false narrative or true or what. Till it becomes a bit too late, the damage has already been done. Therefore, my second thought really here is we need to be very careful about the social media and what it says. Check what actually has come on the social media before we begin to think about it. It is happening all over. And I think narratives are being now created for different reasons. And people tend to believe those narratives. Therefore, just like other media that we have who behave responsibly, who do not publish something till it has been checked, till they know what actually the story behind it. And if the story, they do not know if it's true or not, they're they're very forthright in saying that we cannot completely verify whether this is true or not. I think social media also, when they play this kind of a game, there has to be a greater care in terms of determining the truth, whether this is fake or verified. Thank you, Vineet.
All right. Great points there, sir. Rashmi, if you can hear me.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Rashmi, you're someone who's perhaps privy to discrimination and the hypocrisy that the Western world has shown towards Indians and Hindus in the past as well. What do you make of this particular episode? Isn't this a blatant violation of all the norms of ethics that we see in journalism and the propriety which should exist when you're reporting about something?
Well, to be very honest, if you see the reporting in the Western media, mainstream media, during the violence, it was very biased. Even if facts were yet to come out, even if investigation was yet to happen, it was quick to amplify the whole Hindutva narrative and angle, which has now been debunked. But I think the brazenness with which the media is continuing to push that narrative by selectively picking up sentences from a very holistic report is actually very alarming. When it comes to Britain, Hindus have in the past protested in front of the BBC headquarters, in front of the Guardian headquarters for their bias, and it's not something new. It has been ongoing for the better part of the past decade, and the community has been actively trying to take it up without much without it bearing much fruits, because we can clearly see that such narratives which are anti-Hindu and which can probably lead to more violence against Hindus and people of Indian origin is still being pushed, irrespective of it not being the case. What really scares me is that, maybe it's just stuff on social media or media, and, it's easy for people from outside to dismiss it. But, it can actually translate to real-time violence, be it in terms of subtle racism or, more active threats, as in the case of Leicester and Birmingham. So I think it's actively, there has to be responsible journalism. Otherwise, it can actually lead to the stereotyping of a community and lead to successive, incidences of violence against them.
All right, Dr. Parth.
Yeah. So the only thing
is there a way to, reverse or undo this narrative? Is this something which has the capacity or the propensity to be corrected? And if so, what are the means and methods and initiatives?
That's a really good question. I just want to clarify one small thing first, is that the headline actually didn't pick up any sentence from our report. That sentence is not in there at all. It's not a minor finding. It's not something that's taken out of context. The original headline literally does not exist in our paper, and there's nothing in our paper that can be misconstrued to have suggested that Indian-based accounts fanned the flames in Leicester. Now, to answer your question, I think it's a multi-pronged approach. We need to have people who are doing research in this area, who are theorizing about the problems, people who are bringing out what is happening. From our side, we are satisfied that Bloomberg responded and changed the headline. But we want to point out that this happened only after social media pressure was applied. In our own conversations with Bloomberg, they did not respond to us. They did not wish to change that headline. And, that's unacceptable to us as people who did the work. Our work is being misrepresented, and this is happening. So I think there needs to be more research done in this area. People need to come forward and make this actually their area of focus. I think also there needs to be greater awareness within diasporic communities. There needs to be greater outreach from beyond the community to other communities. So, for example, the NCRI is not a Hindu-based organization. It's a nonpartisan agency. Every bit of research that we do is grounded in the truth. And the research that the NCRI does is not specific to just the Hindu community, but the disinformation that is spread against the Hindu community is an example of spreading disinformation against a vulnerable community, just as it would be against the Muslim community or the Jewish community or what have you. So I think that that's an important point that we need to make, is that this Hindu phobia that we see is part of hatreds that other communities also experience, to be able to make the case to people that they should care about this, because ultimately when there is this hatred out there, it affects not just Hindus, it affects everyone. And this is something that all communities should have a stake in battling, not just the Hindu community.
All right, Ambassador Goel, your thoughts on how solutions are to be found. The problems are aplenty. The avenues are also aplenty. Dr. Parth alluded to the fact that there has to be help and reach from beyond in order to make sure that something like this does not proliferate.
I'm trying to understand whether we are talking about the problems created by the social media in reporting on issues where they tend to pick and choose, or they actually tend to misstatements, wrong statements, and they tend to interpret in the wrong direction. If It's a question of the social media, how they behave. I think that time now has come that rather than treating social media just as a social media platform, it must be treated as a kind of a news purveyor, news creator of content. It is not just purveyor of content anymore, it creates content. And I think in that sense, all the regulations which apply to the content creators should also apply to them, and they should be held to task if any post by them does create this kind of a problem and does create a fake narrative. That is number one. Number two, as far as the reporting is concerned, I mean, whether Hindu-Muslim narrative or India versus Pakistan narrative, I think this has to be basically understood, and I completely agree with Parth of what he said earlier. It has to be a community-based approach where every community must understand that they have a stake in resolving the issues in a broader manner and involved in an inclusive manner, rather than creating or taking actions which create further divide. Because this kind of a divide is not in the interest of anyone at all, particularly outside in a country like UK or in the West Europe, where one will be taken against the other role. So it will end up hurting all people of Indian origin, not just Hindus or Muslims or Jews or whatever, but everyone will be hurt in that process. Therefore, I think they have to come together, be Indian, and defend their interests as Indians. Vineet.
Okay, good points. Rashmi, your idea of a solution here, and this is obviously a targeted approach, and it's being targeted because of a sentiment. How to quash that sentiment?
Well, I think increased awareness within the Hindu community and more sort of an organized approach to combating disinformation has to be taken. I'm glad that now more than ever, more people from the community are speaking up. They're vocal about what the truth is and the importance for it to be represented the right way. I'd like to congratulate Dr. Parth and his team and all the authors, in fact, for putting this report out, because not long ago, such reports were even coming out. There weren't even such reports coming out. And it's actually changing times, and we need more such people to research and to come up with better reports that the community can then use as basis to fight for their truth. So I think that is the solution. It's through academia, discussion and deliberations that we can go forward. And I'm glad that this is finally happening within the community.
Dr. Parth, what do the people on ground feel about this? How do they react to this misrepresentation of facts, especially in the media?
Well, I think not just this incident, but there's been misrepresentation about what was happening in Leicester from the beginning. That's exactly what our report was about the misinformation about on-the-ground events that was spreading, that was having very, very bad real-world consequences for the people on the ground there. So I'm sure that they're worried about when this type of narrative is spread. I'm sure that they are also concerned that this continues to perpetuate a false idea about what exactly happened in Leicester. At the end of the day, I think everyone who was involved in the Leicester violence deserves to get justice for what happened. And our report was an attempt to kind of bring to light the truth of how this violence was spread, at least one of the main channels through which the violence was spread, which was through social media. And I think the community is gratified by the report coming out, and I'm sure that they would have been very upset by the headline that misportrayed what happened.
All right, Ambassador Goel, what can the government of the day do? Through diplomatic channels, through the consulates and the embassies in making sure that there is support for people who are being targeted here.
Yes, very interesting. I remember when I was working in the missions abroad at different levels. There used to be a post of First Secretary Culture or First Secretary Information in every mission, or it could be counselor or minister, depending on how big the mission is. The task of that officer used to be to essentially first correct or remedy any wrong information about India that is spread to the news channels or the influential communities in that country. And number two, even more importantly, He was responsible for keeping in touch with the people of Indian origin, the Indian community, and even the people of Indian origin who were citizens of that country. Like in the UK, he would be keeping in touch with those to essentially know if something of this kind is brewing up, and if something of this kind is happening. He would actually then meet with the influential leaders of the various communities and try and bring them together again. And more often than not, he succeeded, because if they were Indian passport holders, they all had a stake in remaining close to India, remaining part of India for the various regions. Property, passport, travel, there were all kinds of things. I think that kind of an outreach, I don't know whether it's missing now or whether what is happening, but I think we need to establish that kind of an outreach to the communities once again, and to bring them together again, even abroad, more than in India.
All right, Rashmi, concluding thoughts from you before we wrap up. Ambassador Goel made a very important point that communities need to consolidate their differences. No outside influence is going to work if this is taken care of.
Agreed. I think that issues between communities, they're very microscopic, and external people cannot really judge it too much. And in the spirit of justice, they might overlook certain delicate matters. So it's important for local communities to come together and seek that justice. And I think diplomats around the world can play a better role in facilitating that, because they're trained to do so, and they know the sensibilities and the sensitivities of the regions that they're deputed to. So I think there needs to be more hands-on approach when it comes to this, to avoid it from getting out of hand, and then people who may not know as much from interfering too much with the issue.
All right, great points there. This definitely is a complicated scenario, one that needs a multi-pronged action scenario as well. Ambassador Goel and Rashmi, appreciate you taking out the time and speaking with us.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.